Ah,
Oh, that was a nice one.
FUMFA time.
Check out my new earring, Chris. Look at
Wow.
this.
Those are like, wow.
Right? Like
Those
it's
are like
pretty
horseshoes with danglies on them.
with danglies on them. Yeah. There's like a very cool shape situation going on. Like this piece looks, kind of more unique. And these sort of little dangly things you see on a lot of pieces of costume jewelry, but this, sort of almost looks like a kind of metal thing, like a horseshoe or some kind of a, I don't know. It's almost giving me like the ring in the nose of the bull vibes a
Yes.
little bit. You know what I mean? That sort of
How
thickness.
heavy? How heavy are those? I worry about
Oh,
that. You know,
well,
like,
it's
are you gonna have it with like LBJ ears after a while?
actually it has like a nice weight, like, ooh, it's actually feels like a quality material of some kind, but it's not too heavy. It's actually not too heavy. Chris, I just had deja vu. I think we might have talked earrings. Oh, Chris, that looks so good.
Beautiful pour.
Really nice pour. Oh my gosh, you made me laugh so hard a few weeks back. Um, when you poured that stout and it was just like all foam for about a minute. I don't even know. And it was like
No,
mesmerizing.
it does that, it does that thing that it does, which is
Right,
it,
right, right.
that's what
Yeah,
it
it was
does.
so
It
cool.
hypnotizes people all over Ireland.
Hypnotized that, yes, yes.
So true.
Well, we were just having a fabulous conversation about how about how I rank beers according to my liking, according to what you coined as the pretzel test. Can I have a delicious fresh pretzel and cheese with this beer and have it be a delicious flavor experience? If it's like too chocolatey of a stout or too like bitter of an IPA, it sort of ruins the experience for me. I don't know. How do you guys decide about your beer flavors and pairings and what's going to work for you? I mean, the pretzel test is pretty good, but only if you're kind of like a, you know, very unoffensive like lager or pilsner drinker like me. But I do
Oh,
like other beers, just maybe not with my favorite pretzel.
I think it's good. Ryan says
Oh,
brown with pretzel,
oh, like a brown, like ale type situation?
darker
A darker, okay, yeah,
darker
because
ale or
yeah,
stout, like such as this.
it could work as long as the stout is not, like, tasting like peanut butter or something, you know what I mean? Like, it's not too, because if it's like that, I just won't have my pretzel with it, but
Peanut butter.
I had a stout that's
Peanut
supposed
butter
supposed to
stout?
taste like yeah, it was like
But
peanut butter and jelly.
that's no, but that's wrong.
That's ridiculous.
That's just no, that's
What
silly.
are people doing?
No, no, I'm offended by that idea.
I'm offended by that.
Peanut butter
Well, who
beer.
knows? Maybe a few months from now, a year from now, you're gonna see me with a big old stout.
Mm,
And
Big
I'm
old,
gonna be like, I've acquired the taste.
big old peanut butter and banana sandwich beer.
Peanut butter and banana. I mean, people are getting all kinds of ideas out there. These craft brewers,
It's true. It's
crazy
true.
out there. I have some wine tonight. This is a fave of mine. It's white Moscato, which I know is way too sweet for many people. But how could a wine be too sweet? Sweet stuff is delicious. I don't
Well,
understand.
how's it go with a pretzel?
With a pretzel. Okay, well, the pretzel is specifically for beer. The pretzel test is specifically for beer. It would be fine. It would be passable. It would be fine to have a to have a warm, fresh pretzel with cheese, with a nice little cheddar sauce, a nice little mustard with wine. Although it would be perfect with my favorite kinds of beer. It would be even more perfect Wilton CT is here, says Brenda.
A lot of people here. Susan Davis is rubbing it in. She's wearing shorts
Oh, Susan,
out
you're
in
killing us.
California. We're freezing our heinies off here.
We're so jealous.
But Ryan is in Maine, so he's got it even worse. Anyway, hey,
Oh,
look, it's
oh,
7 o'clock.
yes.
We gotta get Ryan.
Ryan, it's good to see
Seven
you here. And mom and dad are here, of
and
course.
mom and dad.
Hi to
And
mom and
it's
dad.
7 o'clock,
Fabulous.
so official. Let's do official.
We need to do our official welcome. Welcome, everyone, to FUMFA 81. Chris, can you believe it?
No, I
And
can't.
it's wild. And we have a very, very special night tonight because we have double FUMFA alums with us tonight. We have Emily Dillon and Anna Maria Spagna with us. And it is such an exciting night to just get to, hang out with fellow alums, get to hear the awesome writing that they've been working on, and just get to spend some time with them also in the Q&A. So we're really looking forward to hearing their readings and to asking all of our questions. Chris, but what do we have coming up in the next few weeks?
Well, next week we've got Patricia Dunn and Monica Ong, and Monica's going to do some visual stuff too. With she's also an artist, and we're going to have like a combination of visual and literary stuff going on. So that's going to be very cool.
It's going to be
And the
awesome.
week after that, of course, is Romance Night to celebrate Valentine's Day, and we've got a few people lined up there. We're hoping to get some more, but we've got Terry Rose Jurtson, we got the one and only Susan M. Davis out there in California, and if we're lucky, we're gonna have some midnight action, and there could be a spice off because all three of those have written some spicy stuff. So
indeed they have.
tune in for that. And then down the road we've got Blake Z. Wrong, which is an awesome name. Got to find out if that's even real. Chris Terracino, Christine Calvis, Ken Cormier, a whole bunch of people from Connecticut Anthology from this year, and then open mic night down the road.
We have several really awesome group reading opportunities coming up. If you didn't fill out our survey, you can go ahead and fill out our survey now. Let us know what you're interested in reading and sharing with us. But please, just go ahead and reach out if you're interested in reading for Romance Night or our upcoming open mic in March. And we also are planning on a screenwriters night. So if you are one of the screenwriters out there, we would love to have you. And we have one or two other nights that we are planning for group readings. So if you're interested in that, just go ahead and reach out to us just so we know that you're interested if you haven't already filled our survey and stuff like that.
And it need not be spicy for Romance Night. I'm just saying some of these people are spicy. You can go ahead and write a PG rated
Absolutely. Yes.
Just bring a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from your face when the other ones go at it
early. Yes, Romance Night is not necessarily erotica night. It can be any piece of writing you have that involves romance, dating, love of any kind. It's really kind of our Valentine's Day reading, our Valentine's Day Eve reading, because it falls on the 13th. So we want it to be kind of Valentine's themed, but don't worry if you won't be able to sort of duke it out with Susan M. Davis and Midnight.
Yeah, it's okay. But if you want to, go for it.
That is too funny. Well, Chris, we need to get started with our amazing readings for this evening. And our first reader of the evening is going to be Emily Dillon. Let's welcome her now. Hey, Emily. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm sorry I was on mute. It's the danger of
No worries. No worries.
I'm
Um,
good. I'm so happy to be here.
Yay, we're so happy to have you. How was this snowy weekend for you?
It is very cold, and I have two little dogs who will show up in some of my poems,
Oh,
and they require walks. So
Mhm.
I bought a pair of wool overalls this winter
oh my
uh,
God.
so that I can wear them out in the snow and the cold, and they have been clutch. So
Oh my God.
impressive
That's
storm
awesome.
this winter.
But
That is
do the dogs have wool overalls on?
You know what? It's so frustrating because one of my dogs, they're both tiny little dogs and they should be wearing sweaters. It's cold and they're tiny. But one of them in particular absolutely hates all sweaters to the point where
Yeah.
if you put one on her, the next time you try to take her out, she will hide from you under the bed or under the couch
Yeah.
oh
and will not
no.
emerge even with treats. So instead, I just take her out for short little spurts.
You're like, well, okay, suit
We're gonna
yourself,
do our
doggy.
best.
That's cute. That is too cute, Emily. All right, let me share your bio with everyone. All right. Emily Dillon is a writer and educator from Maryland whose creative work ranges from nonfiction to poetry and all the lyrical places in between. An avid reader, she also publishes book reviews and teaching guides. Currently, she is the managing editor for speculative nonfiction and an English educator in higher education. She holds a master's degree in English education from University of Maryland and an MFA in creative writing from Fairfield University. All right, Emily, we look forward to hearing you.
Lovely. Well, hello, everyone. This would be the moment if we were still in person where I would clap and ask everyone to thank Chris and Katie for their work in hosting this evening. Before I get started, I have to address the really serious comment that I see, which is asking where is the source of my wool overalls? And it's a really great Instagram account company that is called Revival. And they make their clothing in Montana. So I do highly recommend them. But let's get into the reading. I'm just going to start right off. This is a piece that if you have heard me speak before, you may have heard. Most of my work tonight will be new and things that people have not heard or have not been published. But I'm going to start with one that was published with Twin Pies Literary Magazine, and it's called Pink Prose. A man enters the coffee shop, and I wonder, does he wear any pink unseen? A pink flush barrette bounces before him, gripping like the hands of a baby girl on hair, fleshy fingers roly-poly among baubles and stiff braids. In front of the peach sugar packets, a two-stepping unicorn. Can you see it? It's the color of sugar and fuchsia. It's the pink of white skin under yellow light. It's pink, the color of tea levitating in the pitcher. I try to ignore it. But next to me, Post-it notes slip thin like tongues from Teacher Edition, Module 4, pink as pedantry, and a baby pink felt pen underlines. I didn't see it before, but there it is. Pink on iced coffee straws. Or are they white? No matter, my eyes see it now. Also the pink of the skin on the back of my thumb. Is there, after all, pink in the lines of this prose, woven into the stitch of its fabric? Suddenly, fuck. Everything is pink. All the orange pink and brown pink and for sure maroon pink, and I can't unsee it. My closed eyes color pink, and I claw at them. Pink nails pulling at long pink scars, hoping for the basil smell of pink, clean pink, that warm soap of pink, and hearing the coined giggle of pink, and oh my lord, if I have a daughter, perhaps I will strangle her. Classy and prim-like, clutching my diamonds, probably in the tub like all those other mothers, the ones who put their children underwater, running out their cheeks until they went pink, until their skin was pink with warm water, until the blood flushed to pink, then purple pink, and looking down at hands, pink with effort and resistance. Start a new bath. Add salts of eucalyptus. Lay back to murderous solitude. Or maybe I will love her. So much so that my skin will burst into pink bubbles of champagne, reaching towards the surface so swiftly, my pink lungs explode, saturated with daughter. So I wanted to start with that piece in part because I feel like it sets up nicely what I'm going to be reading tonight, which I'll be reading poems, I'll be reading some flash essays, some things that are kind of in a weird in between prose poetry. And I have, just to give a little bit about myself, because I think it's relevant here, I just got married in July, and my husband and I are at that point where I'm 31 and we're talking about what kids will look like in the future. And I have found in my writing over the last couple years that mothering has been a reoccurring theme. And so a lot of the work all of the work that I'm reading tonight, unless if we get to the end and there's a little bit more time, I might read a couple other pieces. But all the pieces I kind of put in this phase of called the mothering series. And they all kind of touch on mothering in some way or another. Okay, so the next one is called Can a Grape Break Your Heart? Test 1. That little red grape, the one magenta red like dirt at sunset, can it break your heart? It can as a little red boulder, a tiny tin can jingling along the throat. It can as it sings metal, clogs up the silence of the open road, lodges in the throat as a bad idea, that one forgotten word. A grape can break your heart as it holds court, a stubborn judge, as the frantic hands of a mother shove up and into the rib cage. Maybe she hangs the child over the back of the chair, butt to the sky, and shoves down with all of her might, making of the chair a forearm to dislodge the grape. The grape mostly breaks your heart as it pops out into the waiting air, water-thick, invisible air, and rolls onto the ground as wholly as a glass marble. And the child, swinging his arms, singing his cries, none the wise of the mother's fear, has not yet learned to say the mother's name. Can a grape break your heart? Test 2. My dog ate it before it fell, a snatch and slurp and a smile. What does the heart do when it sees the wide love of a dog's eyes, their playful ignorance and illness? I gather the things, the poop bags, head to the car with the jaunty dog beside me. I call the vet on the way, and she prepares a room. A grape breaks your heart as the dog curls up to sleep on the passenger seat. Can he sense the rumbling? How unaware we all are of the early quivers, the signs before our glee vomits back out our mouths, a mush of appalling fear and poisonous skin. Okay, so that ends the grape series. I am going to continue with my dog, though. And so this next one is called, this is also a poem, and it's called The First Day of Spring. Grasses, the first dug earth of spring, nests of tumbleweeds, blonde branches, and baskets of leaves open to the sky, to the hawk flying low over the scurrying creatures, over the molted feathers dropped trailside by geese. Also the buck with his pointed rack and his frozen hair. The dog's name tag, etched with the crystal of a fine soldered blade before snow, jingling as it rings. Here the nose of the fox, cold as morning air. Like my dog and I cutting through the willow grass to home, her pulling to sniff a rubber tube, me dragging her on. The reeds right themselves over the pond ice, its opaque sheen reflecting the light of fairies and angels and guardians we knew who told us to be careful of thinness. Now, the sound of the semi, perhaps carrying chickens in crates or fattened lumber, slices noise through the lip of the window. We are home. My dog stalks to the windowsill, her nose in the crack, smelling with stiff shots all that overturned dirt already seen, as if she hadn't just seen it. Also tilts her ear toward the foxy cries of the women on 14th Street, pulling their skirts down over the curve of their muscle, down until the skirts become maxis, then wedding dresses with trains, then circus tents so wide and large as to envelope all their laughter, and the shoes as big as the boys' egos streeting. Oh, how I envied those sorority girls, their lurid glances and sweet wetness, the stickiness of the sweat between their thighs, their alive stalking. As my dog does now at the blind pull, a slip away from a predetermined noose for the unprepared. I pocket my acorns of knowing in the corners of my mouth, which break open, stay open, fill my mouth with pistols. Okay. So this next piece is called Pain Grows Up. And this is kind of where the idea of mothering moves more directly into thinking about and imagining the future of being a mother. And a lot of my work is nonfiction, maybe, is me as a nonfiction narrator imagining the future. It's very speculative. And I got to start editing for speculative nonfiction as their managing editor these last couple of months. And it's been a real pleasure because I find that a lot of the work we do overlaps with the way that I think about things in my own writing. As we move into the next couple of pieces, you'll see a lot of speculation and imagination. Pain grows up. Pain yesterday as a running toilet, as morning chill, as the rub-a-dub of thumbs and forearms, pain unfurling itself as my mom rolls it numb with a bang pin and my dad boils water to lay me in the tub. Pain yellow when convulsing, when the black hole sucks me into the bath soaps and the square tiles crack their caulk and the lame towels hang, the ones that my dad bought my mom for their honeymoon. Pain yesterday as separation and floating, as nighttime. Pain today as a screeching muffler, as a bleeding hand smeared on propaganda, as a slinky and halo of baby curls, as far as my mind gets from reality, disassociating into trailing wisps, words to push away from an origin I can't name, a page ripped out in the middle. Pain as a calendar reminder, chirping, as the male bluebird flap diving into my mom's kitchen window. Hello, Pain says from the threshold, waking me from a nap. I brought you tea. Pain as an hour gone, and my mother at the other edge of the dining room table, planning my wedding, as I wait for it all to finish, to be married away, newly named and relineaged, a ligament torn in my heart, and a cadaver piece brought to replace it. Pain tomorrow, as my mom drifts backwards on a moving sidewalk out the kitchen door, across the back porch, over the grassy lawn, through the trees, until all that's left is gray sunlight through the windows. And now, my husband breathing, walking away to return to the television, and I, my legs tingling with numbness or anticipation, can't tear my eyes from the horizon where I last saw my mom. At least, until my daughter, with new bubblegummed whimpers, she's here. I turn and see her pink face, the first color on the threshold since my mom left, and I almost name her after my mom, but I am of new lineage now, new blood, new typeset. And when my mom re-enters through the front door, grayer and shorter, I almost slam the door in her face for reminding me of passing time. When she picks up my daughter, when her back is turned to me, when she shows my daughter the maples and bluebirds out back, I almost take a kitchen knife to stab her between the shoulders, winged toward heaven. But instead I turn and see my husband, whose eyes are welling with happy tears as he looks at my mom and daughter, seeing who I will be in 30 more years. And then the quilts of our mothers unspool at the seams, becoming just thread again. Thread we respool and reuse, weave into an embroidered tapestry for our daughter, the primary colors of dandelions and calf's blood for our hair, and ringed with the smoke of fireplaces, hung over the corner of deer hides where we all lay together until the world ends. Okay. Whew, that one is a lot of imagery and a little bit of violence. This next one is a little bit more sparse. It's also a poem, also includes my husband, and this one is called Notes on a Wedding Day. Notes on a Wedding Day. I am sad because of the end, the blue flashes of sky dusky in the morning, and because of the beginning. I dry my heart to be ready for the day. God is in the reeds, its whispering thinness and the bulk of its tender stalk, also the crumple of waves, the way I bend over in a curl to be sad. Across the sand, women sing. Their rolling lull is so close to the tolling of a bell or a silver-stacked xylophone that the sounds circle, a birthing hole. I move toward them, their eyes on my shoulders and my bare feet, wrap into their outstretched scarves, walk into the water and out. When I see my beloved, his downy hair, his wind called into the nest of his chest, later among the dune grass, I am ready to celebrate loving him, ready to find him among the hips and arms of family, ready to build our own bodies from these bodies, to sing the color into a new sky. Okay, so this next one is, I do feel like I want to put a plug in here. As I was reading that last poem, I was thinking about all the wonderful advice that I got. I'm in two lovely little workshop groups still as an alumni with people from Fairfield, a little poetry group and a prose group. And so my poetry group from Fairfield has given me a lot of great edits and advice, as has my prose group. And so these next couple pieces from my prose group, it's always so wonderful. And I feel like I grow a lot from learning from them. The city. The first sign that I'm now living in the city is when I notice that the man at Falls Road and Northern Parkway, who usually sits on a walker at the I-83 median, is absent. I wonder where he is. Perhaps a doctor's appointment for his knees, maybe a meeting with a social worker. Maybe he's just off for lunch. I suspect that other drivers noticed too. Last week, 3 cars slowed to offer him cash at a green light, handshakes delaying traffic. We wonder about him. We worry. We wonder whether he worries about us. Perhaps the second sign is a new relationship with concrete. I notice the details, which sidewalks are filled at the cracks and which are square blocks laid down like tiles. And the weeds of the tiled ones, how they dine. All different patrons of the sun, those clovers and dandelions, leafy crusts and tree buds. The first weekend, I dug the weeds out from the sidewalk in front of our home with a metal shaft curled at the lip. It's a glorious oasis now, all the concrete, like a riverbed flat and undisturbed. So too, the space of concrete available for my car when I return home from a mid-afternoon errand on a Tuesday, curb as open horizon. Even when we walk to the neighborhood waterfall, the overlook hanging with the sweetness of marijuana and the vines languid lazy on the maples, concrete walls hold back silt to let the water tumble. And oh, the concrete rose over that window on the way home. Or maybe the real sign that I now live in the city is the way I love my husband harder, pulling him into my chest at night. Maybe the sign of the city is holding back his hair and looking at his forehead and tugging in the corners of our flannel sheets. Our dogs lay underneath the covers with us there, hidden beneath the layers and against our feet. Maybe the city is the weighted blanket on top of me, compression as relief. The high plaster walls as a reminder of every edge of my body, every place where the world touches me. Maybe the city is talking about kids and parks as we draw our curtains on the night streetlights. I don't know for sure, but maybe the city could be loved like this, if I let it. Okay, this next piece is going to be published quite soon with Complete Sentence Lit, if anyone knows that, along with, I'll be joining some other Fairfield people who have published there. And it's called Teaching is a Good Job for Mothers. Driving a student home after reporting child abuse against her, wondering if the abusive father will answer the door, teachers secretly playing bingo during our 45-minute active shooter training, deciding which students will move the teacher's desk in front of the door when an active shooter is outside, unable to breathe, staring at the computer screen, 125 essays to grade every 3 weeks. The student who ran away from home, the student whose brother was murdered, strangled, the co-teacher who said those parents need to stop pulling their pants down and having kids, and that student is such a bitch, reporting that co-teacher, and he went to work at another school. bruises on my legs from pushing desks back into place, losing my best friend to another career, losing my next two friends to other careers, losing a school to poor administration, the student who threw her body against my classroom door repeatedly, trying to fight me, no one reading my special education reports but checking that I wrote them, withholding report cards until students pay the cafeteria bill, students not knowing where to turn in their free and reduced price meal forms, buying the top 2 requested items for our students, deodorant and clothing detergent, the squirrel in the ceiling, the vice principal reading off slides in professional development, sick every fall, every winter, every spring, whenever the students return from break, a student whose house burned down the night before, the student that made random high-pitched beeps in class, the department supervisor who took a meeting with feet up on her desk, the counselor emailing saying, "I'm doing a great job," the daily 4th period routine, 46 minutes long, lock computer, lock classroom door, fill up water bottle, use bathroom, breathe 5 times as prescribed by doctor, exit bathroom, grab lunchbox from fridge, microwave lunch, unlock classroom door, unlock computer, eat lunch, answer all emails, plan next day's lesson, print handouts, lock computer, lock classroom door, return lunchbox, pick up printouts, make copies, unlock classroom door, unlock computer, host lunch detention, and did you know that a whipped wire has to leave a bruise or mark on the body, no matter the skin color, to be considered child abuse? And keeping with the theme of teaching, this next one is called Burnout. It's still dusty sunrise through the classroom windows, gray and pink. I don't turn on the fluorescents, let instead, click, a soft yellow halo wash over my desk. The trees beyond the football field stand as skeletons against the rising sky, malleable as wheat stalks in the wind, and a forgotten soccer ball sleeps in the baseball dugout. Many years later, I will be wrapped in flannel sheets at this time of the morning, in a different city, a husband and 2 dogs curled along my legs. But this morning, my alarm woke me before the sun, to teach. Melanie arrives at school before me, and as I settle into my room, I hear her red pen thrashing through the walls. I love that I can hear her. I love her, as it means she can hear me, save me. She comes running when the students get loud, when the bells of my brain ring urgently enough for her to hear. Once, she taught both our classes from the hallway, swinging between door frames while I dealt with an emergency downstairs. Perhaps a busted blue abuse or child terrorism condemnation. Ha ha, maybe I should bring a gun to school. Now, though, I can imagine her asymmetric curls bouncing over her desk, a quick slash through the puddle of papers before the kids arrive, and her room will be quiet and dark. We have our time alone before we need each other. In this morning glow, the students' desks gleam like Midwestern ponds at sunrise, their faces as untouched as the ice. The echo of students' bodies vibrates in the air too, their butterfly wings from yesterday having left a trace, a pulse. Or maybe that movement, can you feel it too? That breeze coming in from the door? Maybe that's them coming now. It's almost time. We won't stay high school teachers for long. In 2 years, Melanie will type in a nonprofit cubicle, no longer needing cement walls to crowd out the shuffle of students. It is better for her there, her mind less squished and dried, less ringing of her heart onto the floor. She will have a baby boy at home too, more than enough to love. I will be gone as well, my name lifted off the door and drifted out the window, a soft hint of sweet apple and chocolate wafting into flight behind me. The students only remember the smell for as long as they are there. Quickly, within 4 years, every student I knew will be gone from that place, replaced with new limbs swinging and smiles hiding. These new humans will only know my name as a spoken collection of letters, perhaps murmured once or twice by former coworkers. But even then, most of the adults who knew me will be gone too. To the woods, to state government, to another school, to cubicles, to the places without children, to the places where we can hold our breath in our lungs and our hearts in our ribs. Melanie leaves the job first, and I don't know it then, but that will be the beginning of the end. I try to move schools, try going across town to the school of silk ribbons and science trophies, and instead end with an unknown child ramming her body into my classroom door one day at lunch, an attempt to force entrance to fight a student of mine, and I grip the door handle and pull backward, laying my body into gravity to keep the door closed. I hold this position for several minutes, for as long as it takes a security guard to get there. He pries the student off the door from the outside. I never see her face, and drags her away. The handle in my hand at last goes limp. I only last as a teacher there for 2 more months. But today I will make it. Soon the children will arrive and I will teach them. Their symphony of shoes and colossus of calculators and machinations of married metaphors will dance across the room, twirl at the twist of our voices. Today, as the sun rises over the skeletons of trees, the room will glow hot white, the sun pulsing radiation at us to stay awake, to stay vigilant. The sun magnifies even now, minute by minute, creeping closer to my desk, vowing to absorb my yellow halo of desk lamp. Today I will teach and teach and teach 5 times, 125 times. The students will learn 7 upon 7 upon 7 until we all head home. I head home, lay down on my bed overlooking the cherry tree, its blossoms still waiting to pop. And I think I have one more, but I think we're at time.
We are at time, but we would love to hear it if it's quick.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had my time note in front of me. It's a poem, so it's maybe like 2 minutes.
All right, go for it.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. So this is the last one in my mothering series, so that's why I kind of wanted to end on this one. And I wanted to thank Victoria, who's here, for the title. She pointed it out in something else I wrote, and it's called The Things We Don't Have Names For. The cold sets in and plastic containers expose themselves on the sidewalk. The warm wind of coffee beans sinks down into my fat and fiber and bone as I enter. His cheeks, Jay's cheeks, sit high on their bones, and I remember the way we jogged along the river's edge under the willows in France, and the brown questions of his eyes then. I shove my fear down my throat like hard-boiled eggs and sit down. Silver quickening fast to our scalps, we are meeting again. My lungs expand like roses, and I feel their petals clump in my throat. A brief, non-committal series of letters had tangled us together again. It only took a text. I push my feet into the floor and feel the floor push back. Did you ever love me? I ask, and the helium in the word friend floats around us. He shifts. Maybe? I'm gloriously mad, like angels and trumpets mad, but also soft mad, like the underside of carpet. I exhale out for 10 years, for all the years, for the dark, bitter taste of rhubarb in college memories, for never making hurt together. We kept the word friend too long to make any. We ignored the things we don't have names for. I need a new language for what we were. We never made hurt together either, my husband and I, though we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to it. When we have a son, I notice the burnt orange color of his squish baby nose as the nurse pulls the child from my chest. My lungs expand like roses, and I feel their petals on the back of my throat. Silver quickening fast to my scalp, the gold strings of my heart can't pull my baby back to my arms fast enough. I let the flavors of onyx, chartreuse, and cinnamon seep in instead. In the last few hours of labor, I have swung through the dark abyss of holes, and only the softening sorrow of my baby's cry lulls me to sleep. As my eyes close, my husband exhales and watches the warmth in our son's body. The brown questions of my husband's eyes try to name him, give our son a brief series of letters that will tangle us together, finally, forever. We love you, he gets out. Our baby shuffles his little body like a wind chime. The things we don't have names for, I cup them in my hand with water from the faucet when I wake. The nurse returns him to me, finally forever, and my baby sinks down into my fat and fiber and bone. I shove my fear down my throat like hard-boiled eggs. I exhale when I remember that my husband also feels the helium in the word parent. We are 2 doves perched on the same branch, holding the present between us. We will need a new language to live this. I can't spell the helium in the word mother either as I watch her exhale. My lungs expand like roses, but she chokes on air as if swallowing petals. My mother shifts like the porch wind chime, and silver quickens fast to our scalps, hers more white than gray. She holds my hand, and I squeeze myself out until I'm dry. Her scalp withers against the pillow. I push my feet into the floor and feel the floor push back. My eyes ask old questions that my mouth won't, and she's thankful for the boundary. She's tired. Maybe I start, I love you, she says. I buckle my frustration to my ribs. She coughs. Remember the way we once jogged along the river's edge as the cold set in? She nods, slowly, and my sorrows soften as her cold sets in. And then, all at once, I swing through the dark abyss of holes. Her cheeks, my mother's, sink down into fat and fiber, and finally bone. I shove my fear down my throat like hard-boiled eggs and cup her love in my hands. I'm gloriously mad, like angels and trumpets mad, but also soft mad, like the underside of carpet. I'm a dove perched on a branch, holding the present. I am a vine stretching nutrients as far as they will go. I need a new language for this, for where she will go, for all the things I can't name. And thanks for the extra time, Katie. That was the last one.
Emily, such a vivid and powerful and visceral and like so kind of like magically surreal, yet like very, very real at the same time. I especially loved and resonated with your poems about teaching and the feelings associated with that. These, the exhaustion and just being so underappreciated and overworked. But aside from that, just these incredible images, the images of mothering, the images of love, imagining the future, and absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much, Emily.
Beautiful.
And pleasure.
Everybody get your questions ready. I can think of a few. All right, I want to talk about speculative nonfiction. I find that fascinating, and
yeah.
And we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, I like want to be the person now saying like, and now Anna Maria.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. That's exactly. Take it away. Emily, we will see you in the Q&A. And now it is time for Ana Maria Spagna. All right, let's get Ana Maria Spagna up here. Let's get her name and welcome, Ana Maria.
Oh, what a treat to be here. That was fabulous, Emily. Thank you. Wow. Wow.
It really was. Ana Maria, how are you tonight?
Doing well. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. What a treat.
Oh, yes. We're so excited to have you. Chris, can you read Ana Maria's bio for us?
Of course. Ana Maria Spagna is the author of several books, including the poetry chapbook Mile Marker 6, which is just out from Finishing Line Press.
Woohoo!
And pushed Miners, a Merchant, and Maybe a Massacre, forthcoming from Tory House Press, and both of which were included in her FUMFA thesis. Her previous books include Up Lake, Restless Essays of Coming and Going, Reclaimers, Stories of Elder Women Reclaiming Sacred Land and Water, Test Ride on the Sunnyland Bus, winner of the River Teeth Literary Nonfiction Prize, 100 Skills You'll Need for the End of the World as We Know It, a humor-infused exploration of how to live more lightly on the planet, and 2 previous essay collections, Potluck and Now Go Home. Ana Maria's work has been recognized by the Society for Environmental Journalists and as a 4-time finalist for the Washington State Book Award. She teaches in the low-res MFA programs at Antioch University and Western Colorado University and lives most of the time, although I don't believe tonight, in a remote town in the North Cascades of Washington State. You can find her at www.anamariaspagna.com and on Twitter at amspagna. And she also happens to be, I believe, if my math is correct, which is, let's be a little skeptical, she may be our 200th reader.
Yes, that's right, our 200th individual reader.
Wow, is there a prize? Do I get a prize?
We've had, that's right.
Oh, we should have had a prize.
You get a gift certificate to somewhere. We'll figure it out later. But anyway, that's right, 200 individual readers. Emily's been on before. Otherwise, she probably would have been the 200th reader.
Right,
so it's you. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
And take it away.
And congratulations to us.
Thank you. Yes. And of course, you know who deserves a prize for the 200 readers are Katie and Chris. So you guys are amazing. Thank you for all that you do, bringing people together. It's an honor to be here. And a particular delight to be with Emily, who was my first friend on Ender's Island and a kindred spirit, kind of switching back and forth from nonfiction to poetry, and with our dear friend Susan M. Davis and Barb and Carly and Kristen and Allie and so many others really helped hone the work that I'm going to read tonight. And we're just such tremendous support and great friends. So I'm going to read from two parts of my thesis, the nonfiction and the poetry, both of which are coming out, as Chris mentioned. The poetry book, Mile Marker 6, was published in fall last year and is dedicated to Carol Ann Davis, who shepherded me into this new and at times scary realm. And I'm going to start with a couple of very wintry poems because, I usually live in the Pacific Northwest, which I thought was cold, but now I am in Canton, New York, which is really, really cold, like double digits below zero. And so I thought I'd read these winter poems. They go well with stout, Chris, and also this first one I think has a little mothering theme to go with Emily's poems. So this first one is called Winter Hen. 17 hens, 2 ducks, a goose, all prime laying age, well fed and warm. But when you check the coop on the coldest day of the year, only one sits on the eggs, a dozen or more. Her feathers, sunlight through agate, a child's brown hair summer streaked, fluffed, wide as a poncho or a wall tent poorly staked. Her beak faces backwards, steadfast. But why? Ponds of the future, says the radio voice, will have fewer tadpoles. Cascade frogs are in peril, salamanders, newts, all the amphibians, pikas too, we know, and wolverines. Pines will succumb to spruce budworm and drought. House cats will be picked off one by cougars or coyotes. The hen holds her own, a single cubby in a pen sided with roofing, hippie painted, warmed by a single bulb. Around her, other hens peck, piss-soaked hay, and the goose pins a duck to the ground by the beak from plain meanness. Sure, bungee the door tight if you want. The water drip still freezes overnight. If I could, I'd hire this hen to copy edit my grocery list, to mediate the Democratic caucus, to offer color commentary on a silver confirmation ring, resized and relegated for good to the pinky place. If I could, I'd choose tall socks and vigilance. In the silent woods, pitch seams plead for fire. Boot tracks fill with grapple in your wake. The deep snow soaks clucks and cadoodles. As you trundle toward yellow windows and cradle in your mittens a cardboard crate of still warm eggs. When flakes land on it, they melt. And this next one, again, a very wintry poem. And this one is dedicated to my wife, Lori, who will remember that night. And this one is titled exactly that night. Remember the night the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker rowed the moon boat over the mountains, and we watched from a treeless knob below Purple Pass and stayed up all night so cold, single digits at least, and shared a trash bag bivvy, industrial strength, swiped from the compactor, and shivered tooth rattle hard, me in my rag wool sweater, you with actual down. And the lake sparkled below, a silver fish, shiny scaled, flipping its gills down in the dark, where red antennae grace nice walls, outsize and ancient strange. The others had left us for quitters. So we stabbed our skis in ice like a moon-glinted cage so we wouldn't slide off the mountain. We read aloud to each other from a borrowed book of stories of other mountain people, able neighbors from a gentle north. We watched the moon crest mountains like waves. Castle, Devore, Tuption, Bonanza, never sinking low nor shooting high, balanced thin and teetery, bright marble like those old telemark boots we found used, and who knew? They fit. It must be aliens, we decided, and wriggled from the bag to hop and holler. Take us, we cried, take us. On cold nights afterwards, for years, we'd ask one another, what if that night we'd left aboard? then at some point we knew. We did. So changing gears pretty radically, I'm going to head toward the new book, Pushed, Miners, a Merchant, and Maybe a Massacre, that'll come out from Torrey House this coming fall. And the book tells the story of the so-called Chelan Falls Massacre, where as many as 300 miners, Chinese miners, were murdered, maybe by indigenous people, maybe by white men, and pushed into the Columbia River. It's a story that's told, and there are scraps of it around where I've lived for the last 30 years, but I had never heard it. And searching for the truth made me confront xenophobia and racial hatred throughout American history and into our own time. I'm not going to give away whether it happened or not, but I will say all versions of the story stemmed from one 1892 newspaper article that I found pretty difficult to find. And what I'm going to begin with, what I'll read tonight, is the prologue to the book. Take a quick sip of water here. We're far away from Canton, New York. We're back in the West now, in Washington State. 10 miles from the head of Lake Chelan, a high bridge spans the Stehekin River, where it charges through a narrow gorge of lichen-stained gneiss. Firs and ferns root in tiny crevices of vertical rock. On a hot July day, pre-run, I stand on the bridge watching the blue-green churn, the roiling waves. We're in a strange season mid-pandemic. Time is compressed and urgent at once, and the temperature today is predicted to top 105 degrees. Twigs and cones snap underfoot, so wildfires can't be far off, but somehow, right here, right now, it's possible to feel removed. If you kick the dust and focus your eyes, you can find shards of obsidian from hundreds of miles away. Evidence of interior and Coast Salish people who have trekked these mountains for thousands of years. A cool morning breeze lifts off the snow melt water. Dogwood and cedar limbs bob lazily. Death counts mount. I've always said I want my ashes scattered here. This is where my wife Lori and I met some 30 years ago when we lived as roommates in the historic ranger cabin under the pines, where the roar of the river lulled us to sleep. We had no running water, no electricity, but plenty of wine and Van Morrison on cassette. We eventually built our own home 5 miles down the road, and we still drive or ski or walk this dirt road regularly to gaze down at the midstream boulder that disappears in floodwater and protrudes during drought. In fall, kokanee salmon spawn orange, a carpet in the eddy. In winter, snow piles high. I'd like to think my ashes will wash up one day on the icy banks of river, clotted on rocks with rotted fish and cedar drift, or maybe travel farther to the deep cold lake and on to the once mighty Columbia, slowed by dams and polluted by quicksilver and plutonium, rich with sturgeon and lamprey, osprey and heron, and history. Some people have a passion for genealogy, and I get it. I've seen traces of myself in ancestors I never knew. My Archbishop great-uncle, a cerebral diplomat, my Italian great-grandparents with meaty, dirt-calloused palms, my Irish grandmother, who I did know, with an easy, wide-mouthed laugh, who played a mean game of Scrabble. My people were earnest newcomers, careless encroachers, faithful believers in a murderous faith, writers of words, singers of songs, builders of buildings, ambitious, vulnerable, misguided, energetic, stubborn, sad, joyous humans. I recognize them in the mirror, and I'm grateful to them. Still, I've never felt a strong desire to retrace their steps. My attention, which sometimes leans closer to devotion, has always turned to the land. For a long time, I nurtured it by moving farther and farther from other people toward wilderness and the transcendence that books promised I'd find there. Or maybe that's not right. Maybe it wasn't books so much, or anything as ethereal as transcendence. When I walked alone on an unnamed ridge cloaked in red heather, or skied through the silent forest after new snow, I felt a visceral tug, sure as caffeine coursing after coffee, or euphoria after exercise, or the heart-softened gush when you look in a newborn's eyes. something physically undeniable. For many years, I worked as a seasonal laborer, maintaining hiking trails in the backcountry, 10 hours a day with hand tools, just to be out there. Eventually, I fell in love, bought land, and built a cabin. Even when I didn't like to say I owned land. Instead, I would say something like this: there's a way a place comes to own you. A few years ago, while waiting for the ferry to Stehekin, I browsed the shelves at Riverwalk Books in Chelan and picked up a thin paperback titled Wapato Heritage, The History of the Chelan and Entiat Indians. Why? Because a new tugging had begun. Simple questions that may be easy enough to answer in some places, but are murkier here. Who came before us? What did they do? Who and what did they love? How did they experience red heather ridges or too long winter nights? As I read and reread Wapato Heritage, another story snagged my attention. This one wasn't exactly about the original inhabitants, or not them alone. In the late 1860s, a Chinese merchant settled on the banks of the Columbia River, where a park named Beebe Bridge now sits. The merchant ran a thriving business, the first of its kind along this rugged upper stretch of river, and he catered to indigenous, Chinese, and white people alike. But within a decade, tensions grew heated. One day, on a high bluff within view of the store, according to lore, a group of indigenous people murdered a large number of Chinese miners, maybe as many as 300, and pushed the bodies over a cliff into the river. Locals dubbed the event the Chelan Falls Massacre. A massacre? Perhaps as many as 300 killed? Why had I never heard this story? Truth is, I'd never even heard about Chinese gold miners along the Columbia, though I should have. I knew very little about Chinese people in the American West, though I've lived here my entire life. I also didn't know why indigenous people would feel animosity toward the Chinese miners, though I could make a few guesses. Innate distrust, prescient protectionism, sheer frustration. But I did know Beebe Bridge Park, a flat, grassy campground constructed in the 90s, managed by Chelan Public Utilities District, and popular with RVers in summer. I'd often camped there on my way to or from the once-a-day ferry. Beebe Bridge had always seemed a nondescript, in-between sort of place, alluring only for its proximity to water in this desert-dry region, or in my case, for its cheap, clean showers. To think of Beebe Bridge as historically relevant felt surprising, astonishing even, a welcome challenge to assumptions I didn't even know I held. This simple connection, at first, spurred the tugging. Soon, other changes spurred me. The 2016 presidential election exposed xenophobia in the United States in ways too many of us had never imagined, or at least wildly underestimated. Vehement rejection of immigrants raged everywhere. On Twitter, on cable news, in the streets, people cried over and over that this behavior was unprecedented. If nothing else, the story of the Chelan Falls Massacre belied that refrain. Unbridled hatred of strangers has always been with us. The new regime only rekindled the fire. Around the same time, I took a temporary teaching job and moved for a year to Walla Walla, Washington, by coincidence, another place where the Chinese merchant had spent time. In Walla Walla, I became for a time a stranger myself, and as such I related in small ways with the merchant. Chinese people in the West had been itinerant workers, short-timers, hand-tool laborers. They came and they went, then they disappeared. Where did they go? And why? The more I dug, the more complicated the story became. Not long after beginning research, I began to hear another theory about the massacre, first as a scandalous whisper, you know what they say. Then as a steady hum, sons and daughters of the first white settlers voiced the possibility. The attackers weren't indigenous people. They were white men dressed up to look indigenous. The possibility infuriated me. Of course, xenophobia isn't innate, but instilled, a political tool, an excuse. None of this was new. None of this could be substantiated. And because the facts remained so murky, I'd learned some historians believed the massacre never occurred at all. Suddenly, a made-up massacre seemed possible too. If a place comes to own you, does its history own you too? I believe it does. I've read 1,000 pages and driven hundreds of miles trying to figure out the truth about this forgotten massacre. I used to think of forgetting as benign, such a gentle verb to forget, a venial sin. Now I'm not so sure. I own land in Chelan County. I've benefited as much as anyone and more than most from the murders of non-white people. The sin of forgetting, venial or mortal, is at least partly mine. I didn't always think this way. Maybe moving away changed my perspective, or maybe middle age did. Certainly, I've gained a broader understanding of history thanks to good historians and, ironically enough, to bad politicians. So call this remembering, a search with no end, a river with multiple sloughs. A group of indigenous people massacred a few Chinese men, or 300 of them, or white men massacred them, or it didn't happen at all. Tributaries trickle and flood and sometimes run dry. Who believes which story and why? Why tell the story at all? Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished, Chief Sealth famously said, or may have said, in 1854 in response to a proposed treaty. The veracity of the transcript, which only appeared several years after the speech, has been fiercely debated in a way that would become eerily familiar to me as I sussed out this massacre story. Even the rocks, he said, which seem to be dumb and dead as they swelter in the sun along the silent shore, thrill with memories of stirring events. It's a perspective we colonizers either romanticize or dismiss, but rarely acknowledge as plain fact, or plain lack. We've lost the sense of comfort and complicity such connection can spawn, and maybe one way to nurture understanding, to suture some semblance of wholeness, is to unbury stories of what humans did, right here. So that's where the adventure starts. I won't give away whether I discover if the massacre happened or not. That'll be in the book. But again, thank you, Chris and Katie and Emily. It's been great.
Anna Maria, we are captivated.
I know.
Thank you.
Wow.
What a great entree into this story.
Thank you.
I mean, we could just stay here for a few more hours.
Yeah, we'll just go. Figure it out. Did this thing happen? What's going on?
We gotta know. But not only,
there are chapters that go into speculation about the life of the Chinese and the merchant. And now I'm thinking me and Emily have to get together on this whole speculation thing, right?
Oh my God! Yes, connect.
When does this book come out, Anna Marie?
October 2022.
October.
Oh my God, okay. We have to wait that long, Chris. Anna Maria, absolutely gorgeous. And not only is that so captivating and mysterious and interesting, but it's engaging all of these important issues, all of these deep and poignant and powerful thoughts, just totally captivating. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us tonight. And we need to get these books.
Thank you.
No kidding.
Well, it is time, everyone, to bring Emily back up for our Q&A. Get your questions in the chat. Let's give another round of applause to Emily Dillon and Anna Maria Spagna. Ooh, powerful readings tonight. Totally captivating, incredible imagery, incredible reflections, and speculations, I can say.
If I'm not mistaken, Anna Maria did her MFA graduate third semester project on narrative speculation.
I did indeed. Okay. Yes. We've been thinking about this for a long time, haven't we? Yes.
All right. Well, we're definitely gonna get there to that. And everybody out there, put your questions into chat. And I know you have some people out there. Come on, put your thinking on. Yeah. And ask us some questions. But in the meantime, right, Katie, we got to start with our first.
We need to start with our famous first question, our newly famous, more recently famous first question. But Chris, you do it best. You gotta tell
Oh,
what.
well,
I don't
we'll
know.
start with Emily. It's a very simple question.
Okay.
How has writing changed your life? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple.
No, we like to dig deep. We just dive straight into the deep water, you guys.
Well, I'm going to take the easy pickings because I sit on my ass a whole lot more now that I write full time than I did when I was a backcountry trail worker. So there is that. It has changed my life in that way.
Okay.
You know.
Well, we haven't heard that one. We haven't heard that one before, but that's got to be so true for so many people that they forget about their ass.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Emily go deeper than the ass. She's gonna take.
I like your
Okay,
answer
well,
because
we'll circle back to you, Anna Maria. We'll circle back to you.
You're close to the internet and electricity and everything, and that's a big difference.
I still
Well,
have
I like your answer too because it's like also causes problems. Like you end up with back pain because you're sitting at your computer all the time. It's its own kind of change to your life. Yeah, I guess, I mean, this is kind of like the obvious answer to give, like my little deep answer is that I think writing has like has really pushed me to consider the idea of like how to really revise things and like about myself.
Interesting.
Like how to consider something in a new way by blowing it up. And I think I've just gotten a lot better in my life more generally about taking risks since I've been able to practice them on the page.
That's awesome.
And that was always hard for me as more of a perfectionist. But I feel like I've gotten so much better at it, like thanks to writing.
Do you,
that, like,
Emily,
freedom to explore, I guess.
Sorry. Do you find that you're more empathetic? Is that part of it? So like you write, you're writing obviously very personal stories, even if they're speculative. They're so deeply about you, and things that have, happened to you or that you want to happen to you. Do you find you think about other people differently? And as a storyteller, kind of, I don't know, feel more empathy.
This is a really good question. On the one hand, it's funny because my first thought is to say like my problem was actually that I had so much empathy that writing kind of forced me to like think about the different pieces of that, but also like get into the detail of like the actual moments, like pull away from the emotion a little bit, like into the fact. But the other side of me also says, which I think probably most writers feel this way, is we're all a little bit selfish. Me maybe more so than others, and I feel like there's also that component of like when I'm writing, especially nonfiction, which is like entirely from my perspective, even if I'm researching or asking other people about things. Sometimes it's like a very selfish endeavor with writing, and I almost feel like I become less empathetic if I'm like writing about something and I'm like, this needs to be told this way, and then I have to really like, force myself to think about it from as many options as possible. But
that's so interesting. And I think that still does touch on what you were saying before, that it makes you sort of examine a situation. And even though you're still kind of filtering it through your perspective, you're looking into it more. You're kind of seeing the details more rather than just like feeling them as yourself. You're able to reflect on them and almost find this freedom to experience and imagine these things. I love that. That's awesome. And I think we can relate. And we've got like tons of questions that have come up, Chris. People are excited. So many FUMFA friends in the chat today. Chris, which one should we choose? Maybe JLC Myers? Or we have Anna Maria questions. Okay, let's maybe ask this one. I think this is for both. And maybe we can pass it to Anna Maria first. Do you have advice for novelists who would like to write poetry but may be challenged or maybe a little bit intimidated by that?
I'm going to just steal my answer from Carol Ann Davis and say to make it into play, to allow yourself to play with it. This was huge for me, really, to not be trying to make art at first, but to be playful with the language and to see let the language lead you where you're going. You know, Caroline called it the hallway. Like, we're just in the hallway right now. We're not anywhere out in public yet. And that really gave me the freedom, at least, to dig in.
I love that. Absolutely. Absolutely. What about you, Emily? What would you say?
To kind of go off of that, I think it's play, and that kind of comes back to this idea of revision that I was mentioning earlier. And I actually feel like I've gotten to this point where like poems feel, because they're more condensed usually, not always, but usually, like I can just throw things around and move them and change up words. And I'll just be like, sometimes I just do crazy things where I'm like, I'm going to put this word in every line and see what happens. Or I'm going to, break every line after 6 words now and try it this way. And you're just doing really random, weird things that like I can't do in the same way with prose as easily. And so in some ways, I actually feel like as I've gotten into poetry more, I'm like find that I'm like aching for that kind of play in my prose.
Yeah.
Bring some of the techniques into that.
I love all this love for poetry right now, Chris. Are you hearing this? I'm like the poetry half of this show. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah. No,
Chris. He talks smack about poetry.
This is what Emily, you were just saying, kind of as a lead into this question from Ryan. The repeated variations in the images in your last poem tonight were wonderful. Were you drawing inspiration from something specific there, or ... But you were just talking about the playfulness and that kind of thing. So
associative sort of rhythm.
And this is a great example of that, where and this kind of touches on a lot of the things we've discussed. So I had a relationship with a person in my life that was complicated, that I was trying to figure out how to approach moving forward. And I was like, well, I need to imagine every possible scenario, because I'm kind of like suppressing some of the scenarios that seem harder. So I wrote a prose piece where I did like every speculative imagined scene of what could have possibly happened if I met this person for coffee. And I wrote it out, and then I gave it to my writing group. Shout out to Holly and Victoria, who are out there. And they came back with some thoughts and different suggestions, but they pulled out a couple of sentences that they really liked. And Victoria at one point said, and we were talking back and forth about it, and Victoria was pulled out of me like that. I was just so frustrated because I'm like, I don't have a name for the thing that we were. And she's like, put that in the piece. And so then that led me back to the piece, and I was like, maybe I should just blow this up. Take all the lines that they liked and all the images they liked, and take this central idea of like things that we don't have names for, and just like see where that takes me. And I found that like the images were leading me into other stories about similar things.
I love that.
That's where I ended up. So welcome to playing with poetry.
I love that, because you kind of get into like this flow state where you're not trying, you're not bending, you're not bruising things, but you're kind of moving from image to association and metaphor. And it's sort of speaking this truth that you maybe couldn't say if you tried too hard. And I love that. And you can really feel that in that poem. It was just totally powerful. And I really felt it too. I can also resonate with that frustrating experience you had. That's awesome, Emily. I feel like this question from Susan Davis would be a perfect segue, since we're still jamming on the poetry genre connection here. Anna Maria, Susan M. Davis said, I followed in your footsteps. Memoir to poetry, but now what is your favorite genre? Oh, we don't have to pick favorites, but it's poetry, right?
No, it's not going to be poetry. I'm not going to choose a favorite child. Susan, so good to have you here, and thank you for that. I think that it's more like what Emily was describing, which is that how the poetry now informs my nonfiction, and how what it brings into it. So in that sense, I will say that right now it is more of the wellspring of
I love that.
new ideas. But that being able to bring that into the nonfiction or into fiction, to whatever I'm writing, to teaching for that matter, right? To bring that sort of playful, associative, image-driven stuff into the other work. I'm sure Susan would agree that is exciting.
That is the perfect answer. I think, Anna Maria.
Favorite child. I did not.
No, we don't. No. But I love the way that they both inspire each other, and they push each other forward. And I'm always quoting Charles Rafferty from when he was on here, where he is a poet, but he also writes fiction and a lot of flash fiction, prose poetry, and he doesn't necessarily see the line between them anymore. And I thought that was incredibly fascinating. And I think he's kind of gone to this like poetry prose nirvana type place, and it's cool to hear his pieces. He has joined them both together.
I have to interject here. It's interesting, and Anna Maria, it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this, because I don't know how recently, Anna Maria, you've been like editing for any publication, because like doing that now, what's so interesting is that like genre is like the critic's game, right? And it's the publisher's game. It's not really the writer's game. Like as a writer, we can play with whatever we want on the page. And then when we're done, we have to decide where to send it. And the publisher has to decide how they're going to name it.
Sell it.
But it does become a challenge as an editor, because you're like, I don't want to lie to my reader. And I find that this is particularly challenging around my work, where like, I don't have a baby yet. But if you read a lot of my work and you didn't know that, maybe you would think that I did. And it's like helpful to categorize it as poetry, because then the reader knows, oh, there could be imagination here. Whereas if you name it nonfiction or even speculative nonfiction, people start to get unsure or start to make assumptions.
Right.
And so I always feel like, just label it poetry, because it's like poetry will take anything. But
that's another point for the poetry team, Chris.
But I do feel also like very rooted as a nonfiction person. Like I'm never really creating characters, and I'm never really creating worlds outside of my own. I might imagine like a child, but it's still very much from a nonfiction narrative mind. And so, Anna Maria, I was kind of wondering how you think about that as you send out things, and kind of how the speculation plays into your publication.
I'm in a little bit of a different place right now, because I'm not really doing hybrid work so much as like it's historical research, right? And so at some point you need to be quite clear with the reader what you're doing. This is history. This is where I found this. And then what the trick comes in those transitions when I'm moving into the speculation, to be very clear with the cues that that's what I'm doing, and to invite the reader into that experience, while still, because I feel an obligation, right? These people really lived and or died, and I am carrying their story forward. I don't want to get too crazy with playing with it, which is why I like being kind of in that safely labeled, this is nonfiction, even as I use these techniques from poetry. So took a sideways turn from your answer, Emily, but I think it's good to kind of get both sides of that.
Well, particularly in the prologue, Anna Maria, it's very memoir oriented, and I don't know. One question I have is that how much, because that's a prologue, right? So it's sort of is its own thing, and then you go into the rest of the story, in the history, and then how much do you disappear as a narrator character, or is it more we're discovering all this stuff with you?
It's very much that you're discovering with me, and I think this leads right into Iris's question there in the chat about the forthcoming one, how you delve into the history of places and events that have been that's been neglected. So I don't think of myself as a historian. I think historians do much more rigorous work. And I want to speculate. I want to think about. I want to think about the implications of this history in our own time, which is very different from a historian's work. And so, in order to kind of be transparent that that's what I'm doing, I use myself as the narrator, right? Like I carry the story on my own shoulders and use those memoirish parts to let the reader enter in and think, well, would I think about it that way or a different way? And why is she doing this? And why is that? And it also, frankly, just fills in those blanks where there's just not a lot you can find about these Chinese miners. They didn't write a lot. They didn't write in English. You know, there's not a lot of evidence on the land. So it sort of has to be through our lens. And that's something that I'm applauding in that prologue, is doing that work, you know?
Absolutely, because it's not, you are kind of telling this history, but you're reflecting on it, you're connecting to it, you're kind of relaying that to us, you know, to the reader, to the listener, as something that we could consider, that we could you know, experience. That's different from the job of like the researcher or the historian. And I think that lets so much more in, and it also kind of speaks to like your kind of obsessive interest in that, and what that says about you as a person, or about us as a person, kind of like dying to want to know and wanting to kind of like get justice.
Hoping to inspire other readers to want to look into these stories as well, right?
Yes,
to bring these stories to the surface. Yeah, that's probably right where you were going, Katie, when I interrupted you. But yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Oh, exactly. We have a few more fabulous questions here. Perhaps this question for Emily. It says from Susan Davis, Emily, you are so vivid with teaching. I can't imagine what it would be like during the pandemic. Would you have stayed if you were online?
There's no way to know, I guess, exactly. So what's interesting is I actually left high school teaching in the middle of the year. I left at the end of the first semester because things were just really not good on my end. And it was time.
Good.
And that was the end of January 2020.
Mm.
And it ended up being a very propitious decision to and truly, like, looking back, I'm like, there was a hand of God in this, because I was so kind of at the end of my rope, that the idea of trying to navigate that with the team that I was working with, which I did not work well with, would have been really hard. And I had enough of like my own like anxieties and things to handle at that point. So that's just to say that I didn't experience what a lot of my very close friends did, who were still there.
Right.
But I do teach online now. I teach now as an adjunct professor, and I've been teaching throughout the pandemic to college students and high school students in dual enrollment. And I love teaching online. It works really well for me, I think, because it creates an obvious emotional barrier.
Yeah.
And as someone who like loved a lot, like my love can still come through in the online space, but I also have a much more like established boundary.
Yes.
And I have been returning to the classroom now. I do teach now as an adjunct at in person at one of the schools where I teach. And that's been kind of a joy to return to as well. And it's frankly incredibly different working with people who have chosen and paid to attend schooling and who are legal adults. There's a functional difference that cannot be overstated.
Emily, I hear you. As an adult ESL teacher, I specifically chose that path. Nothing against the younger people out there.
And I still tutor and coach and like work with kids that are in elementary through high school. But the tutoring space works a lot better because usually, again, like there's more room to work on the motivation with the students in that one-on-one setting. And it's so hard because schooling is compulsory. There's so many students who don't want to be there for lots of valid reasons.
Totally.
And so it's really hard. And the online space makes, I think, that even more difficult. So.
Yeah, no, that's happy that you're in a better situation now and enjoying the benefits of that. I really, really hear you. I think we got to all of the. Okay. So Anna Maria, JLC Myers, Joanne Myers wants to twist your arm a little bit. If we promise to buy the book, will you pretty please
Can't do it.
No, we gotta buy the book.
I can't. I will tell you that some of the stops along the way included, much to my surprise, going out with a grave dowser. This is like someone who took a crystal and went looking for the graves of these people. Also, driving around with a really fantastic elder in the Okanagan tribe, who he claimed, man, we killed 700 of them. So,
Wow.
there were many different stops along the way, and an archaeologist who thought that I'm giving away too much. They're ghosts. They're all ghosts.
Okay, but those tasty little tidbits can help tide us over,
Right.
and maybe we can invite you back to read more.
It's a mystery.
Well, and I have to remember, okay, so for the people like me that like maybe missed it the first time that she said it, is this book out yet or is it coming soon?
It's coming
Okay,
out.
I was like, I would have purchased it. I got 6 mile markers.
That's right. You've got that one already.
I've got your poetry. It's right there. It's on next to my bed.
Yeah, but the
October.
October.
You're gonna have to wait.
You can go scouting, you can drive around with the elder, you can do all the things. It'll be fun.
I'm so excited.
So good. Well, also Anna Maria has several other books that are already out that you can just tide yourself over with these fabulous other, including the poetry that she just shared with us. Yes. Chris, I think it's time for our famous last double question.
Let's do it. Double question. Okay. So part one is we'll start with Emily. It's part one is a pearl of wisdom for the youngsters coming up in the world of writing. Some pearl of wisdom about writing, the process, anything you can share. And then part two, a book recommendation to go along with that.
Oh, this requires preparation.
Sorry. We like to
I want to do it well. I'm a perfectionist. It's hard not to think about that play conversation again. I feel like where I taught a creative writing class in college for the first time this winter, which was so exciting. And we started our very first lesson in writing prompts with associative work.
Awesome.
And I start with just kind of allowing. I think it's really important to know that you as the writer don't know where the piece is going. And I started writing thinking that I had to know before I started.
Ooh.
And so I think that that's really what I try and impart to my students. And the main lesson I want them to take away is that the writing will tell you where it's going to go. And that you don't know until you're in the middle of it. And I just have so many things that I'm reading.
Maybe a recent favorite. So there's
I
not
know.
so many.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what's on my bedside. That's why I'm looking over here. I mean, this is the one that everybody talks about, but feels relevant here. Braiding Sweetgrass. I'm in the middle of it, and there's this great essay in the middle. Speaking of playing with language and form, where she takes the form of a scientific lab report and she uses that form to tell a story about her own native and indigenous experience with land. To the point where at the end, when you would get to the acknowledgments section of a lab report or the references, it lists things like the elders and that's it.
Wow. That's awesome.
And it's just really brilliant in terms of its play with form and language. And I've just learned a lot from it too about the way to approach the world. So that's my current one.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Emily.
Nothing people already don't know to read though. I don't like.
But it's great to have that your seal of approval on it. Extra recommendation.
There's also, I should say, speaking kind of like Anna Maria did about nonfiction research-based work. I'll have to go grab the title because while she's talking, because there's a book that's by a historian about this really cool. My husband got it for me for Christmas, and it's about a historical sack owned by a woman who passed it to her children at the breaking of her family during slavery, when the mother and the child were sold separately. Do you know the name of this book, Anna Maria? Because I'm blanking on it. Okay.
I can't remember the name either, but I know the book you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, I'll pull it over. But it, in terms of the way of approaching research through speculation and doing it in the name of justice and opening stories up that the records have been lost for.
Wow.
That book is like blowing my mind. So I'm going to grab that.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Anna Maria.
Let's see. So I yes to what Emily said about the uncertainty and going in like that. I want to advocate for working on many things at once, working on many projects at once. I feel like writers go in, they have one project going, and then you put so much pressure on yourself, and then it becomes a chore to write. And I'll tell you, when I write like it's a chore, it sounds like I'm writing a chore, right?
That's right.
So to have these many different projects going at once and how they cross-pollinate is so exciting. And so thinking of books that do this kind of cross-pollinating, I love World of Wonders, Amy Nezukumadatil, wonderful book about the non-human world. I'm teaching a class this semester on embodying the non-human, so I'm all excited about non-human world. And also a very simple, elegant, beautiful book by my friend Chris Latre is called One Sentence Journal. And he started this book just by writing a sentence a day, a beautiful sentence, but a sentence a day. So, carrying around one of those little moleskin notebooks, writing in it. And so, so Chris Latre and Amy Nezukumadatil.
Nice. We always get such fabulous pearls.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
That book by Chris Latre reminds me of Ross Gay's new book too, The Book of Delights. That idea of like
it's also
going through your life
right now. Yes.
Speaking of poetry prose mix, but it is the Ashley Sack story, but it's all that she carried by Tia Miles. And it's the journey of Ashley Sack, a Black family keepsake. It's pretty incredible in terms of the way that it's handling like history, and it is very historian. She is a historian. But handling speculation.
Fascinating. Such excellent recommendations and pearls, Chris, as usual.
Fantastic pearls. I thought you were going to say maybe stand up and take a break from sitting down so that your ass.
Right, that too.
Standing, yes. Do yoga.
Yeah.
I think that's a good pearl. Yeah. But these were fantastic pearls.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much once again, Emily Dillon and Anna Maria Spagna. Your readings were absolutely captivating, and what an awesome discussion we got to have with both of you here. We wish we could keep talking to you and asking you questions. We'll just have to have you back sometime. Absolutely. And Chris, who's coming up next week?
Next week, we have Patricia Dunn and we have Monica Ong. It's going to be very special, so please tune in.
It's going to be awesome. And make sure that you go out there and you follow Emily and Anna Maria on social media. You go ahead and buy their books and stay tuned. We all need to find out the mystery in October. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our lovely audience. Thank you again, Emily and Anna Maria. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Katie.
And have a good night, everyone.
Peace.